If you would bow your heads in prayer one more time. Father God, Lord, I thank you today for the opportunity we have to be in your house, to be in your presence, to be in this place, to be on a sacred and holy ground. A place, Lord, that we have come not by accident, but by your ordained will. Lord, for just a few moments, may we push aside the distractions and the things that are happening later today, maybe even on later on this week, maybe even the things that are happening in our life right now. That we could just for a moment look past the circumstances, the storms, the frustrations, the arguments, the uncertainties. And through it all, just push that stuff aside so that we can hear you. So that we could experience you and feel you in a mighty way. That we could receive the word that you have for us. And Lord, with that in mind, may I get completely out of the way, and may you speak through me, that it be your words and nothing else. Lord, we ask you would have your way right now. We pray these things in your name, the name that is above all names, the name of Jesus. Amen. Today we conclude our series that we've been in for over the last 3 weeks. We had a little break with Father's Day, but we've been in a series, if any of you know, we're calling God in the Dark. And over the last several weeks, what we have done is we've talked about some truths that are pulled out of the book of Job, and they're perfect truths for the season and time that we find ourselves in right now. In week 1, we recognize an absolute truth that God is in control, that He's in control of all the things that are happening in and around our lives and around us, even though we may not feel like He's in control, even though we may not see that He's in control. He's got this. He's got all of this stuff under His control. And then in week 2, we talked about another truth, and that is the fact that He cares about us. That He honestly does care, even though it doesn't feel like it sometimes. When things are falling apart and we're experiencing pain and suffering, it's very easy to say, God, do you really care? I mean, do you honestly care? Because it doesn't feel like you care. It doesn't feel like that you're doing what's best for me, even though you say that you'll do what's best for me. And today we're going to look at one more truth that kind of brings it all together, and that is the truth that He knows. That he honestly, He knows. He knows what's going on, and He knows what He's doing. There is nothing right now that is happening in your life, in my life, in society, in the world around us, that is catching Him off guard. It's not. None of it is surprising Him at all. This pandemic, the coronavirus, the hate, the division, the injustice, the rioting, the tension, it's not surprising to Him. The marriage issues, the financial problems, the health things, none of these things are shocking Him at all. He is fully aware of it, and He knows what's going on. As a matter of fact, the Old Testament describes God this way. It says that we have a God who's gone before us. That we have a God who's gone before us. In other words, He has already been there. He's already gone through the very thing that we are about to encounter. Deuteronomy 31 says it this way, verse 8, the Lord Himself, He goes before you and before me, and He will be with us. He is with you. And then this famous one that we all know, that He will maybe never leave us nor forsake us. But don't miss the beginning and the end of this verse. That we have a God that goes before us. He goes before us, and He will not leave us alone. And He says that I will never leave you nor forsake you. And then He says this amazing word. So therefore, don't be afraid. Don't be discouraged. Even though everything in your life says be afraid. Everything in your life says be discouraged. He says, don't be discouraged. Don't be afraid. He says, I've gone before you. I've gone before you, and I know what I'm doing. In Isaiah 45, God Himself says this, I go before you. This is one of my favorite verses. And He says, and I will level the mountains. I will break down the gates of bronze, and I will cut through the bars of iron. God says, I go before you, and there is nothing I can't handle. He says, I go before you, and there is not a mountain that I will not level for you. In other words, there's nothing that He can't take care of for us. And let's be honest. Right now, in our life, we're in a season where we're facing some hills and we're facing some mountains. There's mountains of fear. There's mountains of uncertainty. There's mountains of sickness and finances. There's mountains of job loss. There's mountains of stability. There's mountains of normality. I mean, wouldn't it be nice if things could just go back to 2019? You know, I mean, there's mountains of tension. There's mountains of hostility. There's mountains of anger, and then not to mention all of these mountains that 2020 has brought on. Let's be honest, there were already mountains in our life. The normal mountains that were already there. The mountains of the marriage problems and the communication issues and the job issues and this health issue and that health. They were already there, not to mention all the new stuff that 2020 has brought on and the world and society around us. I mean, there has been a lot of mountains all around us, yet we worship a God who says, I go before you and I level those mountains. I remove them. I take them out of the way. Therefore, do not be discouraged and do not be afraid. That's what he says to you and me. There's a great example of this that's shown true through a church that I got to become close to many years ago through their leadership out in Kentucky. It would be considered a mega church, and this was brought true through something that happened with them. In November of 2019, they made it their mission to pack 1 million meals. 1 million meals at the end of 2019 in November to send off to some communities in Cuba. Some mission projects that they had partnered with and some communities that needed these things. And so in 2019 of November, they packed 1 million meals and they shoved them in these shipping containers and they sent them off. What an awesome opportunity. Well, as they were shipped off, relationship between the United States and Cuba, it got a little bit heated. Some of you know the relationship kind of changed. And Cuba wasn't able to receive the shipment. They weren't going to accept it. And so this food is just sitting in these shipping containers. And so the church begins to make it their new mission to pray every single day that God would release the food. They begin to pray, God, let the food be delivered to the people. They need this food. God, show up and meet the need. And so they had teams that were praying every single day to release the food. As a church, they were praying, release the food. Yet it wasn't happening. For more than a year, over 12 months, these teams were praying and they were getting discouraged. As you can imagine, people were getting frustrated because of the amount of money and the amount of effort and all of these things in this project that was seemingly sitting in a shipping container. For over a year, these things went on, and within the leadership and within the church, there were a lot of questions of, what's going on? Did we miss something? Were we not supposed to do that? Does God know what's going on? Does God know about their shipping containers sitting there and the food that needs to be released? Then, fast forward well over a year into the end of January and February of 2020, just a few months ago. The food was released to Cuba. I want you to notice the timing of this. For over a year, this food sat in a shipping container. For over a year, this food was there. And it was needing to be, what they thought, brought to these communities. But look at the timing of this. But the food was shipped and released just in the nick of time for the biggest shortage that Cuba would ever see due to COVID-19. When they couldn't get food, and they had a need like they had never had before, God opened the containers, and the food was distributed. What's the point? It seemed like God didn't care. It seemed like God didn't know what he was doing, that he wasn't in control, all the very things we've been talking about in all of this. Yet, as always, God was right on time. God knew what he was doing. How many times do we pray and do we ask for something in our life because we know what's best? How many of you think we know how to run our life? No. We think this is what I needed. God, if you would just do this, then all of this would make sense. All of this would be fixed. Yet, in God's wisdom, because he goes before us, Because he's in control, and because he cares, and because he knows what he's doing, he's right on time. And so, again, over the last several weeks, we've been talking about Job, and there has been a constant theme in the book of Job. Whether or not you've picked up on it or not, if you start reading the book of Job and you read it, you will find this. You will find a consistent theme from the very beginning of Job to the very end. That Job, his biggest concern is that God doesn't know about what's going on. Job just is really, he's not questioning whether or not God has the power to do some things in his life. That's not the issue. It isn't that Job is questioning God's might, his power, and the fact that he could fix all of this stuff. No. Job is actually concerned because he feels that God is just not aware of what's going on. And in Job's mind, it's like, well, if I can just get my needs in front of God, then he'll do something about it, because surely he can do something about it. So Job's biggest issue is that he just doesn't feel that God is aware of the issue. And so Job's like, God, do you know about my family? I mean, do you know what happened there? Do you know that I lost all of my kids? Do you know about my wife? God, do you know about my health? Do you know that I am in excruciating pain, that I'm covered in sores, and that I'm having all of these issues? Do you know about my friends, Job, turning their back on me? Job says, God, do you know about my business? Do you know about me losing everything? Do you know about me losing all of my livestock and all of my workers? Do you know about this, God? Because, God, I feel like if you knew, you would do something. And so look what Job says in the 30th chapter, verses 27 through 31. The churning inside of me never stops. Days of suffering confront me. I go about blackened, but not by the sun. I stand up in assembly and cry out for help. In other words, he's like, I am surrounded by people. I go into a place where I'm surrounded by people and I cry out for help, and nobody's listening to me. Nobody is there to help me. I've become a brother of jackals and a companion to owls. In other words, he's saying, I can't sleep at night. I can't sleep because of the anxiety, because of the pain, because of all of the things that have happened. My skin, it grows black and it peels. My body, it burns with fever. My harp is turned to mourning and my pipe to the sound of wailing. He's like, I'm listening to depressing music all the time because this is what I am. God, do you know about this? This is what Job's saying. Do you know about these things that I'm going through? Do you know about what I'm feeling? A couple of weeks ago, I pulled together a group of pastors, and I was trying to take them all out to lunch to get them encouraged. And it ended up turning into a complaint session. Does that ever happen to any of y'all? All right, two of them, okay. And we began to exchange war stories about what this season has brought on to us. We're talking about some of the things that our people are going through. Some of the pain and suffering and some of the stuff that we're going through. And there was just a massive presence, an overwhelming sense of hurt, pain, and uncertainty that honestly was beyond words at times. And I shared for myself the lowest point, and probably that was it for me, that I experienced in COVID-19. And it was extremely early on. It was right when stuff went down and everything just shut down. And I'll never forget this day, and it still affects me to this moment. Many of you know I've been collecting watches since I was a kid, and I'm a part of a watch group on Facebook. That's probably the only reason why I have Facebook. I can't stand Facebook, by the way. But in this watch group, it's a nice forum of people that talk about watches, exchange watches, and that's what it's all about. It's about talking about watches. And this guy came on there and shared something that had nothing to do with watches. And it was a moment where he just laid out a paragraph of pouring out his heart and crying out about a situation and needing someone, and the only friends he had was our watch community. And he proceeded to tell our group about his 6-year-old boy and the things that he was dealing with. And what had happened was His 6-year-old had some pre-existing conditions. He's in Europe. Felt like he was right here in Fredericksburg with me. And his 6-year-old had some pre-existing conditions, and he had contracted COVID and the coronavirus, and the symptoms and conditions had taken a toll on his son, and they had to take him to the hospital. And when they took him to the hospital, as his 6-year-old is in pain and in suffering, they pulled him from his mom and dad. And his boy is screaming and kicking and shouting out for his father and for his mother, and he couldn't be with them. They wouldn't allow it. As you can imagine, his reaction wasn't so good in the natural. He began to go after his kids, so much so that they had to restrain him, so much so that they had to sedate him, because everything in him wanted to be with his son, yet they ended up pinning him down to where he couldn't be with him. And what was horrible about this was the last time he would see his kid. And the fact that he was separated from his child. And couldn't be with him in those moments. I think every one of us sitting in this room can understand. I mean, everything in us would have scaled the building, busted through glass, Mission Impossible stuff to be with our kid, right? Imagine this. And this, I remember reading this and I thought, God, do you know? I mean, do you know about this? Are you okay with this? Because I'm not. Yet we have a God who says, I go before you. I'm never going to leave you. I'm never going to forsake you. Do not be discouraged. Do not be afraid. We have a God who knows. The word know in the scriptures, it indicates a deep understanding and knowledge. And so when you see the word know, K-N-O-W, when you see this word and you do a study in the scriptures, it's important that you go back to where it first surfaced. It's in Genesis 4, the first chapter, and it's talking about the relationship between Adam and Eve. It says Adam knew his wife. He knew his wife Eve. That's what it says. It says that he knew her. The Hebrew meaning of this word, know, means to know completely and to be completely known. God, do you know about this? To know completely and to be completely known. God, are you aware of this? To know completely and to be completely known. In Genesis, the 4th chapter, verse 1, in the NIV, it shows you a little bit different. It says Adam lay with his wife. Now, this gives this imagery of an intimate connection. To be intimate with somebody means that you know them inside and out. You know everything about them. That you are completely exposed. They know your imperfections. They know your perfections. Some of you are like, yeah, you know. They know everything about you. The good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between. And this is what the Bible is saying, is that we have a God who knows us completely. The Hebrew word is yada. You know, some of you study Hebrew all the time in your spare time. It's important in context. Yada is the word. And yada means to know completely and to be completely known. And all throughout the Old Testament, this is why we bring it up. In the Hebrew, you see it over and over again. Yada, yada, yada. And this word keeps popping up because this is what God is communicating. I want this relationship with you, God says, to know you completely and to be completely known. To know you completely and to be completely known. You see, this is the desire. Yada, God knows you completely. And he wants you to be known completely. He wants you to know him completely. David uses this word 6 times and to describe God. Look at Psalms 139, verses 1 through 4. O Lord, you have examined my heart and you know everything about me. You know when I sit down and when I stand up. You know my thoughts, even when I'm far away. You see me when I travel and when I rest at home. You know everything I do. You know what I'm going to say even before I say it, Lord. Now, I understand when some of us read this passage, it's terrifying. Some of us when we read this passage, we're terrifying because we're like, he knows. He knows all my junk. He knows what I do in private. He knows my heart. He knows the words I speak. I mean, I thought he just paid attention on Sundays, you know. No, this is not, though, in context, that's not what David is speaking of. David isn't speaking words of fear. I want you to understand this. David's not speaking words of fear. He's speaking words of comfort. He's saying, God, you know me. He's saying, God, you know everything about me. He says, God, you know how I feel. You know when I hurt, God. You know the emotions that I'm feeling. You know what I'm going through. None of it has escaped you, God. This is what David is saying. And can I say something that I believe that every one of us would agree with? When we are hurting and when we are struggling and when we are going through uncertain times and in unideal seasons, it is really great to know that we have somebody who understands what we're going through, who knows what we're going through. How many times have you gone to someone to talk to them because you just want to vent and you know good well they're not listening? And it's like, you don't know what I'm going through. He does. And this is what God wants us to know this weekend. That even though we're surrounded by the unknown, we can find comfort in knowing that he knows. Have you ever noticed a child, a baby, a toddler? Have you ever noticed, maybe you go to pick up that child, or maybe somebody hands you the child, and they start crying. And immediately when they start crying, you're like, well, this one doesn't like me. Or immediately you're like, take that back. But they react, right? They start freaking out, they start crying, and do you know what's happening? That baby, that child knows that you don't know. That child knows that you don't know. They want their mommy, they want their daddy, they want their granny, that child knows that you don't know. They want somebody who knows when they're hungry. They want somebody who knows when they need to be changed. They want somebody who knows when it's time to take a nap, when they need to burp. They know that mom and dad, they know what they need. And there is comfort in knowing that they know you. And so they want you. They don't want them, they want you. Why is this? Because there's great comforting and it is calming about the presence of someone who knows you and knows what you need. That's Yada. A God knowing us completely. A God who goes before us to level the mountains. Think about it in Job 36, 37, and there were 37, 38, and 39. Job goes off on this, remember this whole tangent, him and God get this whole conversation of questions, and Job asks these questions, and then God responds, but God responds with questions. And he says, Job, were you there when I established and built the earth? Job, do you know how much water's in the ocean? Job, do you know about the constellations? Do you have anything to do with that? Do you know about the sun setting and rising? Were you in charge of that, Job? And so he goes through all of this, and he asks these questions, Job, do you know? And God is answering. He's like, no, Job, you don't. And God says, but I do. And so in anguish, Job cries out in a season of life that makes no sense whatsoever, where everything's falling apart. He cries out, saying, God, do you know? And God says, Job, I know. I know what you're going through. I know. You may remember this. Right before God answers Job's questions, God says something to him. In Job 38, verse 2, he says, why do you talk without knowing what you're talking about? He says, Job, why are you running your mouth about things you don't know anything about? You know anybody like that? Don't look at the person next to you, you're going to get in trouble. He says, why are you asking questions about stuff you have no clue what you're asking about? And then, after the questions that God brings back to him, the sun, the earth, all those things, look at Job's response. We didn't look at this yet. Job 40, verse 4. I am unworthy, Job says. How can I reply to you? How can I respond to you? You're God. Yeah, you know. He says, I put my hand over my mouth. Job's like, I'm gonna shut up now. I'm gonna be quiet. You're God. You're good. I'm gonna just stay right here. What happened? What happened? Job realized that God knows what he doesn't, and he finds comfort in it. Think about this in your own life. The things that you question and you shake your fist at. Job finds comfort in knowing that God knows what he doesn't. And he finds comfort in this truth. That God knows what he's doing. That God is in control. And that God will redeem. And I promise you we're almost done. Because right in the middle of Job, we see that Job, he gets it. He's going off about all these things that he doesn't know, but in chapter 19, Job actually declares what he does know. How many of you know there's a lot of things we don't know? There's a lot of things we don't know. In Job, there was a lot of things he didn't know. But in Job 19, he finally declares what he does know. Look at verse 25. Job says, I know this. My Redeemer lives. Oh, man, that's good. Job says, I don't know a lot of things. There's a lot that I don't know. There's a lot that I don't understand. There's a lot that I don't comprehend, but I do know this. My Redeemer lives, and he will stand upon the earth at last. There's a lot of things happening in my life, Job says, that I don't understand. There's a lot of things happening in my life that I am literally begging and pleading could be different and could change, that don't make sense to me. There's a lot of things in my life that are literally maybe even driving me crazy right now. But even though I don't understand it, even though I don't like it, I know this. My Redeemer lives. He's in control. He cares for me. And he knows my Redeemer lives. He knows, Job is saying, that he's got a God that goes before him. Deuteronomy 31 verse 8, that he's got a God that goes before him and that will be with him, that will never leave him, that will never forsake him, and therefore there's no reason to be afraid and there's no reason to be discouraged. It's in Job's darkest hour. It's in Job's darkest season of life, where his world is turned upside down, that he sees God more clearly than ever before. And this has been the prayer through this last 3 weeks. It's what we started this off with. It's what we're going to finish with. The prayer that we, like Job, through this time of realizing that he's in control, that he cares for us, and that he knows, that we could, like Job, as he said in the 42nd chapter, verse 5, that we can get to a point where we could say, God, my ears, they've heard of you. But now my eyes, even though things have been dark, even even though things don't make sense, even though things aren't ideal, even though it seems like my life is falling apart. Lord, now my eyes, they've seen. There are a lot of things that we don't know. We've never been in a more uncertain time ever. Are the kids going to start school? Who knows? Or are they going to go to school 1 day a week, 3 days a week, 2 days a week? Who knows? I mean, is this thing going to flare up again? What's going to happen? What about the rioting? Is this going to hit it here? What about the economy? Who's going to be in the office after November? What's that going to look like? Then what about this? Oh, then don't forget about that. Oh, and then my marriage thing. Oh, Lord have mercy. And then quarantine. This has been horrible. I can't stand them anymore. And the kids, oh, they are so far behind. And then look at the bank account. It just keeps going in the stock market. And there are so many things that we don't know, that we're uncertain of. There are so many things that are seemingly out of whack. But we, like Job, know this. As chapter 19, verse 25 says, our Redeemer lives. Lives. And so through all of this, we know the outcome. You can read about it. We're going to win. Because he wins. We are going to be victorious. We are going to have peace. We have hope. We have everything we need because of him. And he says to you and me, he wants to remind us that he's gone before us, that he's leveling the mountains. So don't be discouraged and don't be afraid. He's still living. Let's pray. Father God, Lord, I thank you for these last several weeks. I thank you for these words. I thank you for the reminder that you really are in control. We thank you for the reminder that you honestly really do care, even though sometimes it feels like you're not in control. Even though sometimes it feels like that you don't care. You are. You are in control, and you are completely and utterly caring for us. And there's nothing you don't know about. There's nothing. There's no small detail in our life. There's no huge detail in our life. There's no storm or anxiety or pain. There's no wall that we are faced with. There's no argument that we're going through. There's no obstacle that we're trying to jump over that you are not aware of. You know. And Lord, may we go to your arms. The place where we can find comfort. Because you know us. You know what we need when we need it. And Lord, for some of us, we feel like you're delaying. We feel like that we can't believe that you haven't released the shipping containers. We can't believe that you haven't fixed our marriage, that you haven't fixed our finances, that you haven't fixed our health, that you haven't fixed society, and that you haven't fixed these issues. But Lord, you are in control, and you've gone before us, and you know what you're doing. Lord, I ask right now that we would find great comfort and peace and be reminded that you, the Redeemer, are very much alive, very much control. And Lord, may we walk out of this place, Lord, feeling that peace of knowing that you have taken care of this. Lord, right now as we pray these words, may you lift the weights off our shoulders. May we feel the burdens being lifted off of us, and may we place them in your hands. Lord, we pray these things in your holy and your precious name.